going to talk a little bit about the regulatory issues. So, once upon a time, the EPA was in development of RF exposure guidelines. In fact, what you're seeing is a slide here from a briefing to the FCC in 1995, where they were talking about the completion of the guidelines that they were putting together. It was a two-tiered set of limits that they were developing. There had been for many years previous robust research activities by the EPA, but they were fully defunded by 1996 on this issue. And that's how we landed today. We're in a situation where we have, and this is just an image from the lawsuit, Environmental Health Trust et al. Versus the FCC, where the FCC is affirming 1996 limits. However, there has been no adequate review, as the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit clarified. Now, I want to point out that in our case 2 years ago, the court mandated that the FCC address the issues that it had not shown evidence of reviewing. That was long-term exposure, children's vulnerability, developing brain, reproductive system, environmental effects, and of course, the technological developments since 1996. But there has been no response from the FCC to the court mandate. And if you look at how our limits compare to other countries where they have more restrictive limits, the United States, Japan, and actually many countries have among the highest limits, whereas there are several countries that have more stringent limits, such as Switzerland, Italy, Russia, China, India, and Greece, relevant to where people are living, their homes or schools. And there are, in some of those countries, scientists that are studying this issue ongoing. However, in the United States, we don't have that. There's been no review of all of the relevant evidence on bioeffects by any U.S. regulatory agency with health or science or environmental expertise, not the EPA, not the CDC, not the National Cancer Institute, the FDA, the Department of Labor. There's no occupational activities on this issue either. And that is something that really needs to change, and that's what we're working on. Also, specifically to the issue of cell towers and 4G and 5G, quote unquote, small cells, there's no agency with activities regarding the health or environmental effects, those ambient levels that we're exposed to every day involuntarily because of the networks that are running in our community. There are communities with large setbacks for wireless antennas. So you have 1,500 feet. I just have some examples here: 1,000 feet, 500 feet, 250 feet. Some communities have 50 feet. Washington, D.C. has 10 feet. And of course, the people were informed after this decision was made. And that is where I am living, is right near Washington, D.C. What happens when these start going up and the people have not been informed? Now, in New York City, there are 16 community boards which have passed moratoriums or letters of disapproval on these Link 5G towers that started going up throughout the city. And this is an ongoing issue because of the issues with compliance with historic review. And you can go to our website, Environmental Health Trust, to learn more about that. Another critical regulatory gap is that we don't have a compliance and enforcement program for cell towers, 5G or 4G small cells, whereas in many other countries, they are randomly going out measuring, like India does 5% of their towers every year. And if they find violations, they're transparently posted. The United States, we don't have that program at all. In fact, how our policy is the honor system. So the companies have their experts that they consult with, and they provide reports, and there's no checking of those reports. There's no checking that those reports are submitted. There's also no standardization for these radio frequency compliance reports, and there's no follow-up on the recommendations. So you might have facilities where the radio frequency analysis showed that certain steps had to be taken to bring that site into compliance, but there's no procedures or methods whereby there's a follow-up or documentation of that follow-up, or transparency, of course, which is critical, and transparency is a key issue. We have no measuring or monitoring or mapping for the environmental levels, whereas many countries actually have programs in place where they are regularly 24/7 in some countries actually monitoring what the levels are throughout their country. Brazil, Greece, they have hundreds of sensors, and in France, and where they are online. So you can go online, you can type in your address and actually find out what the level of RF that has recently been measured is. But in the United States, we don't have that. So here's just an example in Greece. These are all the sites from their 500 fixed stations. We also don't have a federal registry of all wireless facility sites. And that's something that other countries actually have. You can go onto the map and see where those sites are. So there's no documentation. If a person wants to find out where they are when they're moving, or if they have EMF-related illness, there's no transparency on that issue. And right now, we're in a situation where there are over 50 bills pending, federal legislation that would preempt local and state control in various ways, environmental review. And I just put an example here of, this is from the Upper East Side in New York City, an apartment where this facility has gone up, and there's legal actions being taken. This is in New York with those big towers. But if you think about what could happen, there's these regulations that moved forward several years ago with the FCC that stripped some local and state authority. But now there's going to be even further actions on that. And what's happened is, because there's not a lot of eyes on this, we've gotten into this situation. But the question that I leave you with is, how can governments rely on FCC to protect the public and the environment with such regulatory gaps? We have no enforcement program, no standardized data-backed compliance procedures, no measuring and monitoring, no federal registry, no health and environmental surveillance, which we need to be doing health monitoring, environmental monitoring of various diverse species populations around installations, especially in ecologically sensitive areas. No ongoing research activities by those agencies you would expect would be looking at the science and health issues, and no regular evaluation of FCC limits and their rules and the way we measure. So I'll leave it at that, and glad to take questions at the end. Thank you.
My name is Joseph Sondry. Thank you for having me. I used to live at 15 Court